All right, we'll get started. Hello, welcome to Marsha's latest webinar, COVID-19 Lessons Learned, Emerging Risks and Planning Ahead. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christy Nicholson and I'm the National Manager of Marsha's Safety Consulting team. I'd just quickly like to start with an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to take the time to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting today, and I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. So for participants who joined our previous panel in July, we discussed COVID-19 as an ongoing risk and something that was here to stay. And a lot has happened in the 7 weeks to the day since then. We were talking about the spike in Victorian cases at the time, and I don't think anybody would realise that it would lead to a second wave far greater than the first. Businesses discovered that COVID-19 screening and prevention strategies and COVID-19 plans in some instances worked and in some instances were failing, and that workplaces continued and continue to be the major spreaders of the virus. We've seen some of the world's tightest restrictions in Victoria. We've seen stadiums reopening in WA and Queensland, and we've seen hard restrictions on borders across our country, and some with no end in sight of relaxing. We hypothesised at the time that COVID-19 was here to stay, and unfortunately I think this is now the most likely scenario. Even ScoMo, our Prime Minister, seems resigned to the fact that a vaccine is the only way out. And it's interesting now to see that vaccine hope is now frequently in the news, including the blip with the Oxford study in the last couple of days. So today's webinar is going to look further than just managing COVID-19 as an emerging risk. Now is the time to actually stop and evaluate your COVID-19 response. It's almost 6 months to the day that workplaces and the commute to work became largely unsafe because of a virus. Where possible, workers have been sent home. All workplaces, including those still in operation, had to adapt to the new risk, and whatever the state of your workplace, you've no doubt responded and reacted to the COVID-19 new risk in many ways. So 6 months down the track in our webinar today, we're going to explore the journey so far. What are the lessons learned and what should your next steps be in the fight against COVID-19? We're going to explore what you can do to evaluate your COVID-19 response and improve. For those workforces still in the workplace, with those with workforces still in the workplace, have your COVID-19 plans been enough? Have you reviewed and updated them? For those with workforces at home, what are you doing to manage those risks now that working from home is likely to be longer than planned and in some instances permanent? We're going to look at mental health and wellbeing and what you should be doing to evaluate your COVID-19 response in this area and protect your workers from mental health risks associated with this pandemic. So on the panel today, I have 3 of Marsha's key safety, risk, wellbeing and mental health experts to answer your questions. Ben Galvin is the Head of Strategic Risk Services in WA. TKO is Corporate Health and Wellbeing Service Delivery Manager for Recover Group, part of Mercer Marsh Benefits. And new to the panel is Emma Morgan, who is the National Work Health and Safety and Customer Engagement Manager for Recover. Welcome panellists. Just quickly, before we get started, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. And I'd like to ask one quick poll to help us understand who's out there and how to tailor our responses to who you are. So what size is your organisation? Are you enterprise with over 1,000 workers? Are you a large employer with between 200 and 1,000 workers? Are you mid-size, 30 to 200 workers, or an SME with, or small to medium enterprise with less than 30 workers? All right, I think most people have come in now. We'll enter the polling and we'll just quickly show you the results. So interestingly, we've got the majority are enterprise, but then next with mid-size. So thank you for that. That helps us to really understand what's going on. My next slide has already come through. And if you haven't already realised, just close the little screen for your polling so it doesn't actually interrupt the session. So, and I'll also like to ask for Marsh colleagues who are on the line, please refrain from entering into the polls. We'd like to poll clients only. So for our last webinar, which was 7 weeks ago to the day, we held some polls then, and I'd like to share some of the results with you now. So you can see on the slide, preparation for COVID-19 was strong. So 84% of respondents reported that a COVID-19 plan was in place. However, confidence was not so strong, with only 52% feeling prepared and confident of handling an outbreak. And after Victoria going through the second wave, I wonder what the results would be today if we asked the same question. Would people feel less confident after watching what's happened in Victoria? When we asked what it had done to manage return to work, 78% had completed a COVID-19 risk assessment, which is great, but only 54% had conducted an employee wellbeing or survey check on employees. Lower still, 47% had implemented screening into the workplace, and only 20% had provided any type of manager-specific training to support remote teams. So you can see that the key area had been done, but once we started to get down into other activities for COVID-19 management and prevention, we started to get some lower results. It'd be interesting once again to see what's happened now. All right, so this webinar that we're going to run today, it's going to be more interactive than most. We want your input. It's going to help us determine exactly what we want to talk about. For those of you who would like to ask a question, there is a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen, but I'd also invite you to make a comment as well. This is about lessons learned. It's about what we know about what's going on with our clients, but we'd love to hear from you if you've got a story to tell. And if I read it in the questions, then there's likely that I may read it out. I will be keeping an eye on questions throughout the discussion, and I'll try and answer them as we go in order to keep our train of discussion going. So our first poll here, and once again I'd ask Marsh colleagues to refrain. What are the COVID-19 challenges that have been the most difficult to manage for your organisation so far? So you can select all that apply. So this is a multiple choice. Is it managing the working from home population? Has that been difficult for you with regards to sending either a small or a significant portion out? Is it implementing effective screening processes? So whether you understand what you need to do to screen or whether you've had failures in screening. Is it employee mental health and resilience? I'd certainly be surprised if the majority of people didn't have issues with that. Is it a potential lack of planning for COVID-19 and the reactive response? I think the majority of people on this call would have had some level of element of surprise in COVID-19, and most people would have been reactive, and even those with pandemic plans, whether they be in healthcare, have clearly been shown to need more than what they've actually done. Is it navigating the state-based requirements and restrictions? A lack of senior management support for COVID-19 resources. So have you found that senior management either haven't taken it seriously or haven't provided you with the resources that you need to manage COVID-19 effectively? Is it enforcing COVID-safe measures in the workplace and actually getting your workforce to comply? Managing workers who have been stood down? failures in COVID control measures, or potentially complacency by workers in COVID-19 risks and the required responses that they need to do. All right, we've slowed down on our results, so there's a few more coming through. I'll give you a couple of seconds and we'll show everybody what the polling has been. I think it's slowed down now, so we'll show the polling now if that's okay. Of course, we predicted employee mental health and resilience being one of the biggest challenges to COVID-19. And certainly Emma and T are going to go through that in much more detail later on in the session. All right. So we'll move over to our panel now. And to the audience, as I said, please feel free to send through your lessons learned. But Ben, if I can start with you, what are some of the lessons that you and your clients have learned around COVID-19 so far?
Thanks, Christy, and welcome all. Look, I think, there's lots of challenges, and I think the previous poll demonstrated what those challenges are. Having to I guess, plan and react at the same time. There's lots of changes that are happening outside the control of our clients, where the client does have to react quite quickly, which makes the planning quite challenging. 7 weeks ago, where we did the first webinar, we spoke about, the planning component and answering the what if questions. And they're still really important. And they could be operational type questions. What if you get an exposure in the workplace? What happens if someone falls ill at home? Do they come in? The illness at the moment is quite challenging because we're coming into spring and lots of people have got the sniffles. What does that mean? Should they come in? So it's around those, what if questions are really quite important, that really form your plan. Now, I know, Christy, you mentioned the vaccine, and, I often think about, should we be planning for a vaccine? What's a vaccine going to do? It might address COVID-19, but I think, the world's changed now and businesses have changed, and we need to be really planning for the next pandemic. So focusing on a vaccine really is probably one hurdle to overcome, but I think we need to do certainly a lot more than that. So, things change rapidly, the information changes rapidly, and it's challenging to get on top of what information is relevant versus what's not necessarily relevant at the time. I'll touch quickly on the state-based issue, because I know that came up as one of the second biggest challenges. And it's a good segue, because you'll notice the four of us who are presenting, I'm actually in Western Australia, which, touch wood, we've managed to navigate it quite smoothly at the moment, which puts me in a bit of a sterile office at work at the moment, where the other guys are still working from home. So it certainly is a big challenge, and the state-based requirements are generally set outside of the workplace, again, depending on what your Premier wants. So you've got to, each business has to accommodate what can be done within each state, being mindful that there are requirements and restrictions in the other states as well.
Thank you, Ben. Emma, have you got any lessons learned that you've really discovered with your clients?
Yeah, certainly. So I am the token Victorian on the panel today, so I can talk from some personal experiences in the COVID journey, as well as some examples from our clients. So, and look, not just with Victorian clients, but generally when COVID first hit, I think we probably all saw, some real band-aid or knee-jerk sort of responses to the immediate needs, particularly from the services we provide around, the home office ergonomic training and virtual assessments and, a level of training, I guess a bit more at a superficial level around the mental health and wellbeing of our employees, starting to build up some skills in leaders in a business around how to manage a remote team and how to support connected work teams. And even seeing, a lot of employers providing financial support for employees that have been sent home to purchase home ergonomic equipment. But a lot of those clients I spoke to, I even spoke to a client last week who told me that they gave every employee $600 to purchase home office equipment, but they admitted they had no monitoring of how those funds were used. So I'm guessing that, verb and lobster sales were up that week. And yeah, really not that due diligence around those initial knee-jerk responses that they put in. But clearly now we know that those short fixes we're well beyond thinking that we can just get by, particularly here in Victoria. And here's a fact for free. A clinical diagnosis of anxiety is where someone has worries most days for a 6-month or more period. And hey, guess what? We're 7 months into COVID down here in Victoria. So, we really need to take this seriously, and that's mental health injury, physical injuries, and I can even speak from my own experiences of sitting way too long, is that, those physical injuries, we are definitely seeing that wave of those injuries coming in now. So I'm now seeing the lessons learned from most, a lot of companies we work with, is we've got to move just from that knee jerk now to, a really significant level of compliance-focused workplace behaviours, really looking at, a redesign of policies and procedures and business continuity plans. Boy, I think a lot of people are dusting those off the shelf and really looking at what they really need to look like now. That whole IT chapter in your business continuity plan probably needs a significant overhaul. I've got one client that went from bushfire, directly impacted by bushfires at the start of the year, and rolled straight into COVID. So certainly looking at how that business continuity plan really needs to look now. But I think I'm seeing clients really looking hard at thinking about, if someone was injured from working at home, or if I've got people at work and they contracted COVID, can I say with hand on heart that I've done everything reasonably practicable as an employer to mitigate that risk of injury? And some examples, working with a national client at the moment who, in the first stage of COVID, had a one-page checklist. Everyone complete your home office checklist, send it back in, and really knowing now that, again, not monitoring the results of that and having that higher level of compliance and due diligence. And again, if not having that evidence yet that they really have done everything reasonably practicable, and now we're working with them on not just a checklist, but it's a home workplace, and even the language is changing. We're not just working at home. This is our workplace. So even changing that language to a workplace home risk assessment, and seen some great examples where taking it beyond just your ergonomics and your health and safety, your lighting and the likes. It's also including questions around, okay, as an employee, because employees, have that responsibility to monitor their own health and wellbeing as well, and asking employees, well, what are your strategies working at home to alter your postures more, to keep connected with your manager and your teams, to be able to separate work and home life. So that's been a real lesson learned that I've seen, particularly with some of our Victorian clients. But this particular client I'm talking about, I said, now that you've got lots of return to other states, are you getting a lot of people that are requesting to work from home? And they said, absolutely yes, a large number. So we know that into the future we need to think about these things. Just another quick example, an aged care client that I work with, unfortunately have had to learn way too many lessons down here in Victoria because of outbreaks, but they're using that knowledge now to do simulated outbreak drills in their states or their other states around the country. So, we do emergency fire drills in our buildings and our facilities. This may now be part of your business continuity, that we also need to do simulated outbreak drills.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Emma. And that's certainly something that everybody can take away, in that if there is an outbreak What is your plan? Are you practicing the plan that you've developed that I think 84% of people last time we surveyed said that they had a plan? Have you actually run through it, whether it be via a desktop or in reality, to check to make sure that it would work? T, have you any lessons learned that clients have learned either the hard way or potentially what you're seeing now with regards to the COVID-19 response?
Yes, absolutely. One thing that has really something that Emma hasn't mentioned but has really come to the forefront for us is that it's clients now are looking more towards, because we saw that mental health and resilience is one of the biggest challenges there. And it's actually identifying where that risk lies, because we understand now that when we talk about health, it's more than just mental health. Like mental health is one of the components of that. And so your physical health also comes back and manifests itself. And then your social isolation and the social well-being factors and the financial factors is all involved as well as the vocational, so the work. So when we're talking about well-being, there's a big focus, I know, on mental health, but when we just tackle only mental health, it doesn't tackle the issue at all, because we're just scratching that surface. So now companies are starting to realize that's just one component. We actually need to make sure we actually have a program in place that looks at the physical side, that looks at the social, that looks at the financial, that looks at the vocational, and it all encompasses into one whole wellbeing program, because that's when we can lift the state of wellbeing. Because health, as a definition, is the state of your social, mental, and physical. So not just the physical side. And, I think COVID now has really brought to the forefront and highlighted to everyone how health is an important part of our quality of life and overall well-being. And what I can see, or what a particular client has learned is, this is a retail client, is that they're getting more customers through the door who are a bit more aggressive and a bit more less patient. And so these guys or their employees who are on the floor and dealing with customers need to have better skills in handling the situation, in which they weren't focused on before. But because of COVID, funnily enough, people out there, because we're all experiencing life stress, bring that when they're coming into the store as well. So these client-facing roles, not only is it mental health of yourself and your employees, but it's the mental health of your customers and how you deal with that as well. So in that way, we've developed programs in around how to help those retail stores manage that and teach them what and the policies around that. So in the workplace, and how the workforce uses those strategies and policies, and really refine that and practice it as well. So there's just a couple of things I thought I'd mention that Emma didn't mention.
Thank you, Tia. And that's really interesting that you're talking about occupational violence, and particularly in retail. And there's certainly been a lot. I walk into my local supermarket and there's signs everywhere saying that poor behaviour will not be tolerated. But it's not just the actual risk of the virus that we're thinking about now. It's the actual flow-on effects and how that affects people and how that affects interactions with people and creates other risks in the workplace. So the COVID-19 risk is now just expanded into multiple different risks that are associated with the ultimate cause of the risk.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's that multifacet that is so hard and so challenging, because it keeps on coming in waves. And so you think you've got something under control and then you're missing another thing. So that's where I think what we've been doing is looking at the analytics. We've been looking at the review. We've been looking at the overall picture, and you've got to continuously do that in your planning so that you're not stagnant, because it changes all the time. But if you continually do that, at least you're responding and you're trying to stay ahead of those challenges that are coming across, rather than being reactive. And once it's already happened, then you have to deal with it. But if you can put something in place because you can see these emerging trends coming up, that's when it's more helpful for your employees.
Thank you, T. So this is probably a good segue into our next section, and we've touched on it, and certainly we've promised that we're going to get onto it. It's around evaluating your COVID-19 response. Now that we are 6 months down the track into this pandemic and into the significant changes that every workplace in Australia has had to deal with, have you thought about and have you actually reviewed your COVID response to continually improve, to understand where potential failures have occurred? If you've had an incident or a COVID outbreak, have you done a thorough incident investigation to determine what went wrong? So I'm going to ask for the next poll to be opened up now. And there's actually 2 polls to this question, so please note. And once again, I will ask Marsh colleagues to refrain. So, has your organisation conducted an evaluation of their COVID response? So it's a sliding scale. At the top, we've got yes, a formal and documented evaluation has been conducted. Next, we've done it. Yes, we've done an informal review, so maybe not so formal. It might not have been presented to senior management, but certainly done some type of review. Yes, we've got something in progress, and I know that we're currently talking to a client at the moment about doing some of this evaluation. No, it was considered, but it didn't go ahead. So you've thought about it, and for various reasons, you actually haven't progressed to that stage yet. No, haven't even thought of it. So it's okay. These are anonymous answers, so we're not going to hold you to account. But certainly, I'm sure that this poll would start you thinking about these things. And the last one is I don't know. So if you go down to the second question. This is a multiple choice. So we're actually now asking if you have done something. If you haven't, there's an item at the bottom saying we haven't done any review. But if you have done any evaluation of the effectiveness of your COVID response. Now, I'd like to try and narrow that down to the last 2 months, because we really want to find out what people have done post the first wave, and potentially for Victoria throughout the second wave, or for other states as we're managing the clusters or the community transmission, or in Ben's situation, how you're managing the closed borders. But has your organisation evaluated the effectiveness with specific strategies? So mental health and resilience surveys, so whether you've done small groups or sent out to the broader workforce, whether you've done working from home ergonomics assessments in the last 2 months. So yeah, not right at the start. Have you done any risk management surveys from working at home? And Emma talked about that a little while ago, that it needs to move now from not just an ergonomic assessment of your work desk, but an actual workplace assessment of the potentially thousands of employees that you've got working from home. Have you done a review of your screening and infection control? Have you done a manager support survey? So to see how managers are going with regards to supporting their workforce. Have you done any review, whether it be desktop or in real, of your contact tracing system effectiveness? So if something does happen, how are you going to contact trace, and whether that be people who are signing in to your workforce at the start of the day? How are you actually going to do that should something occur? Have you done an emergency outbreak exercise? So we spoke about that just a moment ago. And of course, the last one is haven't done any review. So we haven't got any more people coming through. So we'll close that poll and we'll have a look at the results. So great to see that the most popular was a formal and documented evaluation has been conducted, but it's still only 30% of the attendees. So we've done some informal reviews, which is great. And we've got some that potentially haven't thought about it, not sure. So, yeah. And when we look at the specific details of what's happened, working from home ergonomics assessment, excellent, really needed at the moment. It is a big risk and it's a continuing risk. Mental health resilience surveys, great. Okay, good. All right, moving on. So if I just move on to the next screen. So if we think about evaluating your COVID-19 response, what have you done and what should you be doing? And what have you found with regards to the results? So Ben, I'll start with you again, if that's okay. Are you seeing clients start to look towards COVID-19 program evaluation? What have you seen and what would you recommend to the percentage of the attendees that haven't done it yet?
Yeah, thanks, Christy. So great to see that 30 odd % are doing some form of review. Every safety consultant loves doing a review of some description, and this is no different. And I think it's probably more important, reviewing a response to COVID-19, given the rapidly changing environment that we work in. When plans were put in place, there's generally some sort of risk assessment that sits behind that. Risk assessments are fluid. They change day in, day out, depending on what happens around them and the environment that we work and the restrictions we're put on us from governments. So your risk assessment needs to be evaluated and needs to be valid and relevant at all times. We're working with clients around, it's been, if you look at Western Australia as an example, a lot of businesses have been back operating, sort of at pre-COVID levels, albeit with a lot of changes. For a number of months now. We can't afford any complacency. No one can afford complacency. So, we're working with clients around doing what we call the COVID hazard assessment, where we're working with an organisation and looking at sort of the fundamental safety system requirements, sort of managing COVID as a safety issue. So finding out, where's the leadership in the organisation, what's happening at a senior leadership level, what sort of training processes have been put in place, what sort of controls are in place, what procedures are in place. Are people putting too much in place? We mentioned before, there's a lot of information out there. We don't want clients to be investing their time and resources into something that may not be relevant. It may be relevant in Victoria, but it may not be relevant necessarily in Western Australia. So we want to try and make sure that the right resources and investment are going in, but not overdoing at the same time. We don't want clients to be in a position where they find out one of their control measures fails after they've had an incident or an exposure. The idea with a COVID risk management plan is to protect your workers and your business and also protect the community. So it's about making sure that people, you don't have an exposure in the workplace. And that's fundamentally why you put these COVID risk management plans in place. What we're generally seeing is more complacency. We're getting to a now point where it's been a couple of months. There's not a lot of community transmission, if any, in WA. So should we be relaxing our controls or should we keep them in place? And I think there's going to be a number of controls that are implemented because of COVID that are going to become the norm. I don't know necessarily what they look like, but I think we'll find out there'll be more hand sanitizer around, more of those sorts of things. So I think they're going to remain in place for an extended period of time. The other thing when we're talking about, your risk management plan is whilst the organisation has one as well, I think it's really important that, on the last webinar we spoke about each individual, each worker has their own risk profile. So are you looking at that risk profile for that worker and has something changed to change that? Do you have to put additional controls in around a worker? Because we always focus on our clients and our business, but as we all know, it's the people side that's creating the biggest risk and the biggest concern. So are we going back to those workers that may have had a higher risk profile and talking through what sort of controls and how are they feeling? And you may be able to relax some of them or you may need to put some more in.
Thank you, Ben. That's very good advice to be reviewing in that particular way, and certainly, you know, looking at your high risk employees. I certainly know that I've had a particular client that I was talking to down in Victoria, and this was a number of months ago, and we were talking about their screening processes, and from all accounts, it was exceptionally rigorous. There was temperature scanning on the way in. There were questions. There was a HR policy and process that had been adjusted to ensure that people didn't feel like they needed to come to work, because of course that's been a big factor in the spread of COVID, in that some people, and particularly the casual workforce, feel that they need to come to work in order to be able to pay their bills. This organisation had a system in place whereby anybody with any type of symptoms was able to go home. They had no restrictions on sick leave in order to prevent people from doing that. And this still happens. So what were the failures in those processes? What were the failures with their communication with employees? How did the first employee that came into their workforce actually, you know, not adhere to those, or potentially whether they were asymptomatic? I didn't get involved in the risk review of that particular case, but certainly for organisations who have that, you know, screening, infection control, detailed management plans, I think that the COVID has still been known to beat it. So constantly evolving and constantly managing is important. Now, we've had one question come through that I'm going to read out and this could be whether it be Ben or Emma or T. In relation to social distancing in the office, this person is interested to know how many companies are maintaining a system of A and B teams, so swapping out across different days, whether they're allocating specific desks in the office, are they booking desks, and what's the cleaning regime? I know that we've got lots of examples that we can talk about from just what Marsh is doing, but is Ben, T or Emma, have you seen workforces who are returning to the workplace? And Ben, this might be a good one for you as well, because you've somewhat returned to normal. What are you seeing is how people are managing that return to office workplaces?
So thanks, Christy. So we certainly have seen clients who have implemented the team A, team B, or red team or blue team, you know, with varied success. You know, I haven't spoken to those clients, but I don't think they probably wouldn't be doing it still, given it's been a couple of months down the track. You know, we've seen clients who you know have measured their workplaces, measured their workstations, and, you know, provided they can maintain the physical distancing requirements, you'd be surprised how many people you can bring back into an office with that. You've got to be mindful, though, that the physical distancing requirements extend to the whole of the workplace. So whilst they may be sitting 2 metres apart at their workstations, they're still, you know, you've still got the kitchen area, you've got the photocopy area, all those sorts of things that need to be considered when you talk about this physical distancing. I know one thing that does come up with clients is around agile workplaces or hot desking. And we do know clients that have moved away from that and, you know, allocated people a set desk for maybe a week, and then clean that desk, because, you know, agile or hot desking, you know, put someone at a different desk, a different person every day. So I know that clients have certainly moved away from that setup.
T, Emma?
And I'd just probably add in that, well, sadly, being Victorian, there's not a hell of a lot of the returning back to the workplace, but clients that I'm, you know, working with, I suppose, really pleasingly, whilst they might have a plan to it, really having the flexibility, adaptability around those plans, considering people's personal circumstances, probably goes without saying. But and it's important, I guess, to raise consultation as part of work health and safety requirements, that you really need to be asking your workforce what the plan looks like for everyone, and there's also, outside of work health and safety laws, Fair Work Act and Discrimination Act legislation also that allows for entitlements for people to request to be working from home. So I think it's just important to have an understanding of sort of not just work health and safety, but other legislations that, really drumming in the importance of consultation, which can be a bit more challenging when we've got people that are more remote, but remembering to ask the people that really do the work what they want that to look like.
I'll just add, Christy, one, and this came up in the earlier slide around challenges. The workplace is a controlled environment, and most businesses can control who can come back and where they can go. One of the biggest concerns we're seeing with clients is around how do you get to work? If I'm catching public transport, I don't necessarily want to jump on a train and WA transport's not nearly as bad as New South Wales, but you want to get in a packed train to go to the workplace, and the workplace might be quite well controlled, but you've still got the exposure on the train on the way in or on a bus. And I know that's been, one significant concern that's come up from workers is, I may need to be there at 9 o'clock, but that puts me at risk because I've got to then catch public transport. So it's around thinking, can you stagger starts, all that sort of stuff to try and mitigate that risk of someone coming into the workplace as well as being in the workplace.
Thank you. And we've had another question come through with regards to once people do get to the workplace, what about getting within the building? What about lifts? So are there restrictions in the number of people allowed in lifts? And I know that a lot of property owners, particularly when you're talking about large office blocks, there's been a lot of restrictions around that. I've also seen when I went to IKEA to help set myself up for working from home, they were only allowing, I think, one group in the lift. Has anybody else seen, or Ben or T or Emma, have you any recommendations or observations with regards to management of lifts?
So your physical distancing, I think it used to be called social distancing, it's now called physical distancing requirements, have to be maintained in a lift. So if you go through WA and you go into all the lifts, they'll say, how many people can go in the lift? And the latest one is there's areas you can stand in each corner. So absolutely, lifts are something that, you have to comply with the same physical distancing requirements as any other area.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on. The last item on this slide is talking about what is the level of mental health and resilience. In the polling results, it was interesting to see that the biggest challenge has been mental health and resilience, yet it still continues to be one of the things that people are constantly managing. So it certainly does tend to be the biggest challenge. So if I just move on to the next poll here. So once again, we've got two polls within this section. Has your organisation established a strategy for the effective management of mental health and wellbeing as part of its COVID response? So thinking about not just responding, and one of the things that we see, whether it be pre-COVID or now, is that organisations do a lot around mental health and wellbeing, but do you actually have a strategy in place? Have you thought about it? Have you taken a step back and built a strategy around what you're doing, much like building a safety management plan or a strategy around managing your general hazards? The second question is, has your organisation established training and or measures to upskill managers to effectively deal with employee mental health and wellbeing issues? So one of the polling questions from the last item was that there hadn't been a huge amount of manager support, and I wonder whether or not that prompted organisations who are potentially attending both of these sessions to actually think about managers and think about how they're supporting their managers to deal with these mental health stresses. And I certainly know that dealing with Melbourne colleagues in particular, the stress is real. And Emma, I was very interested to hear that your definition of anxiety, I think that that would apply to absolutely everybody. Whether you're in Victoria, that would be amplified, but everybody has had some level of concern over COVID for the last 6 months. Every day we all watch the news and look at how many new cases there have been. So that is very concerning, that definition. All right, I think we've probably got most of our answers to our poll. So if I'll just give you another second to enter in. I think that's probably it. We'll end the polling now and we'll show the results. Okay, so we've got a tie for first in our first question with regards to a strategy, which is great. So we've had a number of people continuing to implement their existing strategy, and we've got some people who have developed strategies specific to COVID. As I have seen in the majority, or not the majority, sorry, many of my clients over the years, is there's a lot of activities around mental health and wellbeing, but there's not necessarily a strategy to it. And if we look at thinking about managers, it's a very simple question. Most people have not done specific training or measures to upskill managers. So at this point, I will pass on to, I'll just make sure I can get my, there we go, move on my slide. I'll pass on to Emma and T. Emma, what have you seen around mental health and wellbeing strategies, and how organisations either have done or need to be moving towards managing this in a more improved state?
Yeah, thanks, Christy. And it was interesting to see that a lot of people have a strategy in place, and that's fantastic. We get asked a lot to support workplaces in developing a strategy, and I know T's going to talk to some examples where the strategy's been really based on data, and that's really important. And going back to that consultation piece I mentioned before, I think often workplaces jump in and put a strategy in place without, really understanding the data and really consulting with the workplace around what that program really needs to look like. So I know T's going to talk to a great example to that. I guess thinking about autonomy, autonomy is usually linked to positive well-being for employees and to job satisfaction. We might say it's a control strategy from a mental health risk perspective, but autonomy at the moment for many of us has been amped to the nth degree from those of us working at home. So I think there's a real place to make sure that those at home, that there's a really healthy level of autonomy. And I guess that goes into that middle pillar there around leaders, that, how we upskilling leaders to support that autonomy whilst also supporting employees to feel that belonging to workplace, to team, to still having mastery in the work that they do. And you could also have purpose written there as well. All of those also being linked to a positive wellbeing and job satisfaction, and that's certainly challenging at the moment. And also, what level of personal responsibility is there in maintaining a healthy level of autonomy at the moment? That's why I like that example of that workplace risk assessment, where it puts a bit of responsibility back onto the employee to have strategies in place, or to talk to their manager about strategies in place that create a healthy autonomy. But we're seeing a bit of a shift in I noticed that a lot of people saying that their managers aren't getting a lot of training. We have been doing a lot of leadership training, and we're seeing the shift going from a bit of mental health literacy, which we're still of interest in that. And whilst we're on the topic, happy Are You OK Day to everyone today, a fitting topic to be speaking about that today. But we're seeing a bit of a shift from that mental health literacy type of training, which is still important, but the shift into a bit more, I suppose, around a HR-related function in how do we now manage these teams so that's the healthy level of autonomy, that we've got that belonging, that mastering purpose in individuals' work. So we are using that as a strategy for supporting mental health. And that comes within that next pillar of job design. We're seeing a lot of workplaces are really having to pull apart policies, procedures, related to flexible working arrangements, again, business continuity planning, but job design, we certainly know it goes beyond just home ergonomics. It has to include that element of wellbeing and performance management. You know, what does our new level of performance management and performance evaluation look like? And that now has to include those elements of wellbeing that may not have been so prevalent there in the past. So we're seeing a bit of shift in that leadership training, a bit more to have, I guess it feels like it's got to be more of a HR-related focus, but that in turn actually has a focus on mental health and wellbeing. So certainly getting to, I guess, a higher or more robust level of training for leaders, which is fantastic. And I can say from Marsha's own experience, our leadership team are currently going through training in leading for results. And it was a program HR had sort of pretty much prepared pre-COVID, but it's fantastic timing that we're now introducing this training into our own leaders that really has that flavour around, you know, that healthy autonomy but keeping workers engaged and working at their highest level, which in turn is going to have an outcome on positive mental health, which is fantastic.
Thank you, Emma. T, have you got things to add here? And we've had a question come through that I'll throw at you while you're responding with regards to checking on the mental health and wellbeing of colleagues in Victoria in particular. Are there any strategies that well, the question is you shouldn't use, but I'd certainly say what should you use and what shouldn't you use? And what have you seen with regards to strategies that clients are doing, and certainly evaluation, because I know that you've worked with one of our clients with regards to mental health evaluation, particularly around COVID.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. It leads in perfectly to the example that I actually have. And I just wanted to start off by saying that, you know, the employee mental health side and wellbeing strategy, at the moment, what we're seeing is companies are actually, what I mentioned before, they're coming beyond the mental health and looking at the full wellbeing picture. So when we're doing the review with them and along the strategy, we're actually touching on all the dimensions of wellbeing that makes up the full picture. So like I mentioned before, there's the mental health component, but there's also the physical health, the social, the vocational, and the financial and your environmental, if you want to put that into there. And that is actually the dimensions of wellbeing. So when we're looking at strategies at the moment, we're evaluating across the whole thing. But in particular to mental health, what I saw, or what we've been doing with a client, and in particular, trying to assess what that mental health picture looks like. So instead of saying, I'm just going to do this as an ad hoc because I know I need to address mental health, what we tried to do with them and what they wanted to know was, what does our workforce wellbeing actually look like? What is that mental health risk? You know, where does it actually lie within the company? So what do I need to do and where do I need to look at? And how do I know what I'm doing, is it effective? So in doing that, we did a data analytics piece around it and utilizing clinometric data. So things that actually screen for mental health risk, rather than just saying, here's a mental health, you know, we noticed that there's an increase here and there. We actually did a survey that would give you clinometric data around what that risk looked like in the company. And for this particular company, it actually showed that it was 1 in 3 of their employees were at risk of mental health. Instead, the normal population, or I shouldn't say normal, but the population now, prior to COVID, was 1 in 5 would experience a mental health issue. But in this particular company, it was 1 in 3. So is it COVID related? Most likely. Is it related to all other factors? Most likely as well in there. So all the stress factors in there. So we were able to go, this is what your wellbeing picture looks like. This is what your mental health risk looks like. And this is where it actually sits within the company. So it sat at where the managers were. It sat at where the sales workers were, and whereabouts on that heat map did it sit. So there were different locations and departments that it sat in particular. So we were then able to delve into those areas and actually design a program that fitted with that. So we'd let the data lead us through to the program and design management of it to actually design a program that would address the issues that they wanted to address around that. So in that, we took a step-by-step approach, and we did a multi-level prong approach where we knew that we had to address the managers, and we knew we had to address the sales workers on the floor. They were the two biggest areas that we needed to focus in on. And we know that there was also trickling of other issues around the other parts of the business as well, in which we were able to put in the measures and the program around that. So in knowing this, we know where we needed to put the intense situation and the intense program, and we knew where to put the lighter touch on it as well. So in that way, and we've recently got feedback from that company saying, you know, what we've done, they've been using it immediately. This has been really helpful and really effective. So that just goes to show how delving in and not being scared of what data gives you, utilizing that data effectively can actually set you up and make sure that your wellbeing strategy and the issues you want to address gets addressed properly. And then when we remeasure it, so we're halfway through the program. So when we remeasure this program further down the track, we would like to see that, you know, has this made an effect on it? So far, the response is yes, but what we'll do is we'll reevaluate the whole situation again in a few months' time, knowing that JobKeeper is going to stop and all these other situations. So these things, they're also planning ahead. So this company is really proactive in what they're going to do, planning ahead. And also in this kind of wellbeing strategy, we know that they were saying, look, we've had to restructure, we've had to let go of a lot of staff. So we had to look at the redeployment side of things as well. So that was something that I think we haven't mentioned before, is the whole COVID situation and the workforce, and now your employees and your workforce may get halved. And this is one of the issues is, you know, having your workforce halved actually affects the employees who you have left and how they handle it as well. So looking into those issues and problems. So the strategy is much broader than just mental health. You've got to actually look at the whole plethora going through your workforce, your workplace, your work practices, and then the situations outside. So what you can actually control, and what we looked at where the control is the employees are able to control themselves and what they do and what they practice to actually provide them with a safe workplace for themselves and their peers. So around that kind of philosophy. So anyway, I'll stop there.
We're about to run out of time, so I am going to stop you there. Just quickly, we've probably got about 30 or so seconds to go, and I'll ask Ben and Emma, you've given us a huge amount of information. What's your key takeaway?
Sorry, my key takeaway?
Oh, you go, T.
Well, it's really to stop, reflect, don't just jump on the bandwagon of well-being and mental health. Really take a data-driven, evidence-based approach and to health and well-being. And so really addressing the needs of your workforce and for your workplace more than anything else.
Mm. And mine would be rip up your old business continuity plans, probably your flexible working from home arrangement documents, start again. And as I said earlier, really say if someone was injured or contracted COVID, can you really say you've done everything reasonably practicable to mitigate that risk?
So I would go with don't get complacent and focus on individuals as individuals.
Right. Thank you, T, Ben and Emma, and thank you very much for everyone joining us today. There's a few questions that we didn't get through, so we will respond to you individually, and we will also be sharing a recording, of course, of today's seminar in the coming days, so that, that you'll be able to share that. Make sure you're following Marsh Australia and New Zealand on LinkedIn for insights. And if you have any specific questions that you'd like further information from, please feel free to reach out to any one of myself, T, Ben or Emma, but I've got T's details here as a single touch point for you if you want to talk to us further, or we can answer any of your questions. Thank you again for your attendance today. Bye-bye.